and gentlemen, Siegfried and Roy.
In a town full of big names, theirs became the biggest. With their menagerie of exotic tigers and lions, these self-proclaimed masters of the impossible earned more money than any other act in the history of Las Vegas, a staggering $57 million a year.
Siegfried and Roy had been the single most successful entertainment attraction in Las Vegas history by orders of magnitude, beyond Elvis or Frank Sinatra or anyone else.
Michael Jackson even wrote a song about them.
Siegfried and Roy, it's the mind over magic and you.
Putting on the Siegfried and Roy show took 250 cast and crew members, 75 tons of scenery, including a mechanical 6-story fire-breathing dragon.
I believe that Siegfried and Roy have changed the face of live entertainment in Las Vegas and globally forever.
Throw in an elephant and half a dozen full-grown 600-pound jungle cats, and the word spectacle seems understated.
When you think of Las Vegas, you just think, I should go see Siegfried and Roy.
Night after night, for more than 5,000 performances, Siegfried and Roy dazzled sellout crowds. Through it all, they never seemed to miss a step, nor did their feline co-stars. And then, in the middle of just another performance on a Friday night, 5.5 years ago,
Horn was attacked in the throat by one of those tigers, lost a huge amount of blood.
it stopped. Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Vargas. For years we watched Siegfried and Roy with their lions and tigers with a shiver of apprehension at what could go wrong. And then one night in October of 2003, it did. What happened that night left Roy with devastating injuries. Doctors weren't sure he would survive. It was a shocking end to an act that was one of the most successful in show business history. Few believed Roy Horn would ever walk again, or even more unlikely, that he and Siegfried would ever return to the stage. Until tonight. Siegfried and Roy, along with the animals they love, are going to try and live up to the boast they created for their act. Siegfried and Roy, masters of the impossible.
I think a lot of people thought they would never see Siegfried and Roy on stage again.
No question about it.
You said it was a chance to say goodbye properly.
That's exactly we did. After the incident, we really had not the time, and the time was never right to do this. And I think this is a perfect thing to say. A very nice au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, you know? We did 45 years.
Siegfried and Roy's partnership began in 1959. They grew up in post-World War II Germany, the sons of distant alcoholic fathers. As a young boy, Siegfried turned to magic as his way of coping with his father's icy indifference. Roy found his escape in a love for animals, even working part-time at a local zoo. The two met as teenagers when each took a job aboard a cruise ship as a way to escape their turbulent home lives. Siegfried was performing a magic act and needed an assistant. Roy, then a bellboy, jumped at the chance.
He said to me, what you just did with a rabbit tonight, could you do this with a cheetah? I said, well, of course, in magic anything is possible, you know. Not realizing he had a pet cheetah.
Chico the cheetah, who Roy had liberated from the zoo back home, became a permanent part of Siegfried's act. Siegfried, Roy, and Chico eventually went ashore, performing in nightclubs and cabarets all over Europe. In the late 1960s, they were hired by the famed Folies Bergère of Paris, who were launching a new show in Las Vegas. It was 1960s Vegas. The Rat Pack reigned, and topless showgirls were often the main attraction in any act. Two Germans with thick accents doing a magic act with a cheetah hardly seemed like a likely fit. But their idea of replacing wild, naked, exotic dancers with wild, naked, exotic animals caught on.
The wonderful thing about Siegfried and Roy's show is that you didn't have to be over 21 to watch it. It wasn't salacious or erotic. It was big and sensual, but you could take anybody to it. And more importantly, since 15% of this town is foreign visitors that don't necessarily speak English, we got all of the international trade.
Siegfried and Roy were so popular that real estate tycoon Steve Wynn decided to build an entire casino resort around them and their animals.
The fact of the matter is that Siegfried and Roy for 30 years did 12 to 14 shows a week, 48 weeks a year, and filled the showroom every single night. So for me, having Siegfried and Roy with a brand new show was a very safe bet.
Siegfried and Roy's partnership was uniquely successful both on and off stage, but it was not without its own drama.
Siegfried and Roy are like a night and day times thunder and lightning.
Lynette Chappelle performed with Siegfried and Roy for more than 14 years. On stage, she played the evil queen, Siegfried and Roy's nightly foe. Lynette, one of Siegfried and Roy's most trusted friends and confidants, says Siegfried and Roy's relationship hasn't always been a smooth ride.
Been on the roundabout several times, fallen off the merry-go-round several times.
They do argue, don't they?
Yes, they have been known to have some words.
Because finally, this audience is going to see what I have to go through to make him look good.
The best illusion is to get along with Roy, I'm telling you.
Through it all, Siegfried and Roy lived as an unconventional family in their palatial home called the Jungle Palace, a place they shared with 63 tigers, 16 lions, and a slew of other exotic animals. They treated all the creatures like their children.
Well, hello. Who we have here? Good morning. There we go, yeah. And I love you too. Give me a nice smile. Give me a nice smile. Yeah. When they are born, they're basically born with me being there. The first voice they hear, it's mine. The first face they see, it's mine. So most probably they think I am a tiger, you know? I mean, in all reality, I'm sort of the father figure. I guide them through their childhood. However, I am never their boss. The most luckiest I ever can be is they call me my friend.
The footage that we have of Roy playing, swimming, sleeping, lying, you know, wrestling with the tigers is unbelievable to watch.
It was unbelievable for me, and I never understood it, how that happened. And sometimes I got a little jealous because how come I can be that way?
That was then, and this is now.
Hey.
For 5 years, Roy has been defying almost everyone's expectations.
Hey, how you doing?
His physical recovery has shattered every doctor's best prognosis. Through it all, he has leaned not just on Siegfried, but on the animals he continues to cherish. But will that be enough for him to master his latest impossible journey, going back on stage to perform one last time with Siegfried and the Tigers? We'll find out when this special edition of 2020 continues.
Hi, handsome. How you doing? Oh. Easy. Yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah. Oh, I feel so good. Yeah.
Roy Horn's remarkable connection with wild animals has always seemed magical, but Roy was also quick to remind us that in this relationship, joy is coupled with danger.
It feels wonderful. I cannot even tell you the feeling what it is when a full-grown tiger licks your face. But you also have to think at the same time, with one swap of his paw, he can decapitate you. It's that simple. You can take nothing for granted, even if you think you know it all.
Watching him on stage night after night, it was easy to think of the danger as just another illusion. And sometimes it was all just part of the show. For instance, Roy announcing it was Manticore the tiger's first night on stage.
This is Manticore, and tonight is his first appearance in front of an audience.
In fact, Manticore had performed this highly choreographed moment hundreds of times before the night that changed everything for Siegfried and Roy.
It kind of nipped at his hand. He smacked at it.
And then Roy started tapping him on the snout or the head with the microphone.
The sound was just, I remember just being so loud. Pow, pow, pow.
And Roy fell over, and Manticore very quietly reaches over and picks up Roy like a cub. But you can't pick up a human by the back of the neck.
The whole theater was alive. It was devastating.
Roy is screaming, ah, ah!
The screams, the noise, everything.
And then the blood spurted all over Siegfried.
He lost a lot of blood, but everything
must have been
went
scary.
very fast.
Roy was shouting for Manticore.
Don't hurt the tiger, don't shoot Manticore.
Was it pandemonium backstage?
Totally.
Were people panicking?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Siegfried says that he didn't know how seriously Roy was hurt. Did you?
Oh, yes, I knew immediately it was very serious.
Life-threatening?
Yes, it was life-threatening.
Breaking news, one of the rare tigers of Siegfried and Roy attacked.
Roy was rushed here just a little after 8.
Roy came in and flatlined, died on the table.
Manticore had left 2 gaping puncture wounds on the back of Roy's neck.
He had some pretty severe wounds that precipitated a lot of blood loss. And so he was still bleeding at that point, and so we emergently took him back to the operating room and had to operate on his neck where the wounds were at and control that bleeding.
Doctors spent nearly 3 hours in the operating room. The massive blood loss caused Roy to suffer a stroke. Then Roy's brain began to swell, and doctors removed a portion of his skull to relieve the pressure.
I had no idea really what his prognosis was going to be. I knew that there was a neurological injury.
That night in the hospital, the doctors gave you a really grim prognosis.
Oh, yes. And they told me he was clinical dead 3 times.
3 times?
Yes. And they tell me he will never will talk, never will speak,
never speak,
will walk.
never walk.
No, this is the way how it's gonna be.
You were there for that grim prognosis that the doctors initially gave Siegfried, which is that he's alive now, barely, but he may never walk or talk again. When you heard that,
the words didn't really sink in. The words didn't mean very much to me personally. People kept explaining them over and over again, but they didn't really sink in.
did you think that that was the case? Did you in that?
No. For some reason, I know. Or if I always thought also in that case, I guess, somehow we're gonna pull it through.
And making it even harder for Siegfried and Lynette was the knowledge that just 24 hours earlier, they had been celebrating Roy's 59th birthday.
To believe that these people were talking about Roy, they didn't know Roy. These were medical doctors explaining the situation, but again, they weren't explaining the situation about a person that I knew, that Siegfried knew. We just waited and hoped and prayed that what they were telling us wouldn't be so. And as time went on, it was not so.
After years of excruciating rehab, Roy is back with Siegfried at the 100-acre compound in Las Vegas known as Little Bavaria. Roy spends much of his time feeding and caring for the animals that now surround his home. He believes this helps in his rehabilitation.
What's good for me is good for them.
So every morning and every night you make this walk around the grounds?
This is how I condition myself.
Should I take your arm?
No.
No? You got it.
On the night he was injured, many people in the audience said Roy was attacked by his tiger and dragged off stage. But Roy believes he fell on stage after suffering a small stroke and that Manticore was trying to help him, not hurt him.
So you think that he picked you up, as tigers do, their cubs?
With the cubs, yeah.
And was bringing you to safety at the side of the stage?
Right.
And that he saved your life because you think you were already having a stroke?
Yeah.
Even though doctors aren't sure if the stroke happened before or after, you are sure it happened before?
Yeah.
Did you feel pain when that was happening?
No.
You felt nothing?
No, even very gentle.
The experience did not change Roy's love of animals, even Manticore. And while the animals that today share his home are less intimidating than the lions and tigers that once roamed free here, Roy says that is by necessity and not choice.
When we had visited with you many years ago, we had this incredible footage of you wrestling with the tigers, playing with the tigers, swimming with the tigers, putting your arm in their mouth, kissing them. Has any of that changed? Do you feel any less comfortable today having that kind of physical, intimate relationship, that intimacy, that closeness to them?
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of a setback now because of my condition. I'm not as quick like I used to be.
Were you ever, for a moment even, afraid or less at ease?
No.
That didn't change at all?
No, they're literally like your own kids.
It would be human nature after an incident like the one you experienced to have a moment where you might feel a little differently or might feel a little anxious about being around them. And you've never had that?
I would, for instance, I would love to go swimming again with them. That would be kind of difficult with my legs to be how it is. But eventually we'll be coming to that again.
You think you guys will be back in that pool again?
Yeah.
Well, you've already defied the odds in so many ways, Roy. I mean, did you?
Boy, my doctor has told me that within 1 year I will be able to do everything I want to do.
1 year from now?
Yeah.
So what's your goal? What are you going to be able to do a year from now that you can't do today?
Going dancing again.
Dancing?
Yeah.
Roy's optimism about his own recovery has rarely faltered.
Roy, one time he asked me how that could happen. And my answer was, it just happened. And he says, yes, it just happened. And there is no bad feelings about Manticore, about his animals. Absolutely not.
In fact, looking back, the person who almost didn't recover from that horrible night 5 years ago wasn't Roy, but Siegfried. For the first time, Siegfried talks about his battle back from the brink when this special edition of 2020 continues. After being bitten by his tiger 5 years ago, Roy's recovery was measured in weeks and months, not hours or days. Through it all, Siegfried was constantly by his side.
Concentrate what you're doing, standing up straight.
But even as Roy inched towards recovery, Siegfried began slipping into a dangerous despair.
Do you remember the first time you woke up in the hospital? Who did you see?
My pal Siegfried.
And how did he seem to you?
Very down and worried.
Do you remember that moment?
Oh, yes.
From the moment Roy was injured, Siegfried tried to publicly maintain the image he had perfected on stage, the all-knowing magician who could make his paralyzed best friend walk as easily as he once made an elephant disappear. Here, he is playing that role perfectly in an NBC television special documenting Roy's early days of rehabilitation.
All right, you're doing it. If I wouldn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe
Hallelujah.
it. Hallelujah. Yes.
Left.
You're doing it, Roy.
But it was all just misdirection.
What I try to be very strong, and to be strong like Roy, and be strong like a tiger.
Inside, Siegfried was struggling to hang on.
God bless. Thank you, Diane.
Okay, slow. Slow, hold on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed by the injury to his friend and what that injury meant to the only other thing he really loved, his magic show.
After more than 10 years of greeting visitors on the Strip, the Siegfried and Roy marquee was removed.
I was so alone and I was so lost. And of course I got in depression. But the depression was more because of the show.
Because it was over?
Because it was over, without realizing it. This performance, you had to be very disciplined and you had to be very concentrated. And it was physical very much so. But I get instant always my recognition.
And when it suddenly is gone?
It's gone. You don't realize it. You know what's going on with me. And I went through this time and I did a lot of crazy things.
Like what?
I went to Europe. I was running away. Later on, I even went to Greece. I went to Mount Athos. I lived with 1,500 monks and did all these things. And
you stayed with monks?
Yeah, 1,500 of them, and did all these things like you know, 3 o'clock at night. I went up to the church and went with them. I lived like a monk.
What did you think you were looking for?
I don't know. I think I was escaping.
Or running from.
Running. I was actually running from.
When there was no show, Siegfried was lost, totally lost. And without Roy's influence, Siegfried didn't know what path he was on. Roy had a huge amount of fight in him. And he truly, when Roy started to recover, he took one step in front of the other. And as he started to do so, he took Siegfried along with him. And he made Siegfried start to walk next to him. And in doing so, Siegfried started to give Roy the support. And as you see them now, they walk next to each other. Siegfried supports Roy, Roy supports Siegfried.
Okay, good.
Don't get me wrong, there is still great drama at all times.
There's always that
There's
drama?
There's always drama. It's very theatrical.
You and Roy have been together 45 years?
45 years.
What is the thing about him that drives you crazy?
He never is on time.
He's late?
He's always late. It drives me crazy. Half my life I spent to wait for Roy.
Is that true?
Well, he keep telling me, I'm going to be late to my own funeral.
So what drives you crazy about Siegfried?
That he knows everything better. And the bad part is he's usually right.
Now these two men with a lifetime's worth of history together have embarked on yet another adventure, one that they hope will further along Roy's rehabilitation while helping Siegfried reconnect with his one true love, the thing he once thought he'd lost forever, the chance to perform again as Siegfried and Roy.
These guys were made to perform. That's what they love. That's what they want to do.
But many still believe that after 5 years, the return of Siegfried and Roy to the stage is a trick even these two cannot pull off. Will the magic return? We find out when this special edition of 2020 continues. The spectacular illusions that once left audiences cheering now sit silently in a giant warehouse. The puppet army marches no more. And the fire-breathing dragon waits patiently for his chance to once more crush his foes. Siegfried designed the illusions, but it was Roy's remarkable athleticism that made the illusions soar.
He's the thinker. I'm the doer.
The thinker and the doer.
Yeah. That's what he always say. He is the pointer, because I'm on stage, he always said, he's just pointing. I'm the magician, I point. And he had to do the whole things.
But now that Siegfried and Roy have decided to perform together one last time,
Roy was flying 40 feet high above.
Siegfried the Thinker must design a new show that takes in the new reality of Roy the Doer's current physical limitations.
Is this a completely new show? Or?
It's 10 minutes. It's the spirit of Siegfried and Roy. And we have the animals there. And of course, I have to reinvent myself because of Roy, you know. But I think we're going to pull it off pretty good.
Roy understands how big a physical challenge he faces.
I'm going to be tested to the core.
You're going to be tested to the core?
Yeah.
There's only 2 speeds for Siegfried and Roy, full and 0. If they said they're going to walk on stage, believe me, they will go on stage and do something outrageous. They just don't know any other way.
That walk back on stage began when Siegfried stepped up on a chair last year and almost quietly made an announcement that would echo loudly throughout Las Vegas.
Siegfried and Roy are going to work very hard to create a moment of magic on this stage for you next time.
What was your reaction when you heard that they're coming back one time?
One night,
to the stage.
one time,
and it's to
one
benefit
cause.
the Lou Ruvo Institute.
My first reaction, I couldn't believe it. I grabbed the microphone from him and I looked at Roy and I said, "Are we going to really do this?" And he said, "We're going to do this."
The Lou Ruvo Brain Institute is a new state-of-the-art medical facility designed by famed architect Frank Gehry, being built in Las Vegas to treat diseases of the mind like Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, and Parkinson's.
All this is glass and this is all obviously air-conditioned.
Its namesake is Lou Ruvo. He was a prominent restaurant owner in Las Vegas and longtime friend of Siegfried and Roy. He suffered with Alzheimer's. His son, Larry, says that like too many patients, his father was consistently misdiagnosed, in his case as having a heart problem.
And this wasn't 1 or 2 or 3. This was 10 doctors that saw him and all completely missed that it was Alzheimer's.
Wow.
It was a wow. This is all about privacy. All the rooms have shades that come down.
The Lou Ruvo Brain Institute calls its charity event Keep Memory Alive. It is a sentiment that came at the perfect time for Siegfried.
I'm in part of my life now where I think I can give something back. And this country and Las Vegas was so good to me for 45 years. I think that was a perfect reason to do. And the title also keeps the memory alive.
Siegfried and Roy do support other charities, including a magic school in South Africa designed to provide hope to underprivileged kids.
And for the tourists that do some magic and get some extra money, it's a wonderful cause.
They also fund an orphanage run by Siegfried's sister.
She's in Romania?
In Romania. And that's the happiest woman in my life. And when we open up this place and I was be able to support this and help out, and that gave me the greatest satisfaction.
But Siegfried and Roy's commitment to the Ruvo Brain Institute took on an even greater significance after Roy's injury and Siegfried's experience as a caregiver.
It's also no coincidence that you're choosing to help out an institute that is devoted to brain injuries.
Exactly right.
And Roy has suffered a brain
That's
injury. Right. It's also devoted, this institute, to helping caregivers. And so in many ways, this is a cause that is very close to your heart. It strikes close to home.
Very close to my heart.
After the promise was made to perform at this year's fundraiser, Siegfried spent months designing the illusion he and Roy and their tigers will present. Some of that preparation involved playing around with some of the old props in their warehouse.
You always did it to me. Now I'll be able to get back to it.
After 5 years, Siegfried and Roy knew they were both rusty, but they were surprised by how the tigers reacted.
I was a little worried about, 5 years they didn't do the show and how they're going to react. And the wonderful thing is they give us also a lift because they did it exactly the same way with the joy, and everybody was involved, was it then electricity.
But we have to learn, they know better than we.
That's right. They know it better than us.
With the event just days away, Siegfried supervises as the ballroom at the Bellagio Hotel is transformed into a one-night-only reincarnation of the Siegfried and Roy Theater.
A fire ring revolved around him.
Outside, the names Siegfried and Roy once again shine brightly on the Las Vegas Strip. Inside, Siegfried, Roy, and their beloved tigers begin to rehearse. Snacking on stage, the tigers seem pretty relaxed. But for Siegfried, the reality that he'll soon be back performing in front of a live audience is a bit terrifying.
I'm sick, nervous, but also I'm excited.
But as that audience begins to arrive, there's no turning back.
To see Roy out there performing, I have goosebumps.
God bless them. They stand for everything that we want to believe in.
I'm looking forward to it. Everybody else is. It's a big deal.
We're all rooting for them.
I think for him it should feel amazing and exciting and probably very emotional.
While celebrity chefs like Wolfgang Puck and Todd English have things heating up in the kitchen, former cast members of the Siegfried and Roy show warm up the crowd as they wait for the main attraction. Then, as the music begins, a hush falls over the ballroom, and the return of Siegfried and Roy finally arrives.
The spirit of Siegfried and Roy has just arrived.
When we come back, Siegfried and Roy, the magic returns. The odds were against them. 5 years ago, few in Las Vegas would have bet that Siegfried and Roy would perform together again on stage. But as it turns out, smart money was on their return, and now the stage is set for the big payoff. Siegfried and Roy transformed a simple magic act into one of the most successful partnerships in show business history. But for the last 5 years, they've been in the business of healing.
Weiter? Okay. Good.
Now, for one night in front of thousands of friends and fans, they have returned to their roots.
I have an announcement to make. The spirit of Siegfried and Roy has just arrived.
magic that is around you. In nature, plants, flowers, and all the animals which we share this planet with. Look for it, and let it enlighten your heart and your life.
For Siegfried and Roy, it was the chance to finally say goodbye. They even shared the stage with Manticore, the tiger that forever altered their destiny. For them, the night was about changing what had been a tragic last performance together on stage into a triumphant final appearance.
Are you ready for the second show?
Yeah! Backstage, it was a tearful family reunion.
All right, all these faces, oh my God. Sharon's crying.
Many of the people who worked with Siegfried and Roy on thousands of past shows wanted to be there to help out on their friend's final night.
Five and a half years later, and half the cast is here tonight. We'll always be a family, and nothing will change that.
You did it, man. You did it. You did it. You did it. You did it.
Blue and forever.
All good.
Siegfried and Roy now hope to show people there is more than one kind of magic in their lives.
Of course, a lot of people saw this as a comeback, but for us it was an opportunity to give, to create a new magic, a different magic. Of course, when we created a show, it always came from the heart. This show tonight came from a fulfilled heart.
Siegfried and Roy's final performance raised $12 million to help fund the new Lou Ruvo Brain Institute, which is partnering with the world-famous Cleveland Clinic. Siegfried and Roy will be on hand to cut the ribbon when it opens later this year. For more on their one-time, one-night, one-cause, visit our website at abcnews.com. And that is it for this special hour of 2020, but stay with us if you want to find out how to save yourself money and aggravation. The next hour of 2020 begins right now.